I'm going to talk about why forests are important, what is driving deforestation, and what policies and approaches work. First, forests matter. They cover 1/3 of the world's land. Tropical forests are especially dexterous. They provide biodiversity, livelihoods, resilient landscapes. They generate rainfall, capture carbon, and mitigate global climate change. And their loss has multiple and devastating consequences, including for health and lives. So, biodiversity. Forests hold 80% of terrestrial biodiversity, from the iconic tiger to the less familiar fly that pollinates cocoa and saves our chocolate from extinction. Livelihoods. Over 1 billion people in low and middle income countries depend on forests for their livelihoods. Across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, forests provide, on average, 20 to 30% of rural family income and subsistence, and a greater percentage for those living in remote areas. For example, 500,000 landless women in Bolivia and Brazil collect babaçu palm nuts. They make babaçu oil used for cooking and in cosmetics. And many people live in dryland forests, which are important for livelihoods. For example, across sub-Saharan Africa, 800 million people rely on wood fuel and more on animal fodder from dryland forests. Others inhabit rainforests. Indeed, much rainforest is not pristine, was created by its human inhabitants. Rainforests are actively managed by communities today. Rubber tappers in the Brazilian Amazon produce natural latex. Trees also build more resilient landscapes and help farmers adapt to climate change. Along coasts and riverbanks, local communities manage over 20 million hectares of mangroves that protect fisherfolk from hurricane and storm surges. And in mountain forests, trees help hill farmers adapt to climate change by protecting soils and slopes from erosion. And UK supports Nepal's Community Forest Livelihoods Programme that works with 12 million people organized in forest user groups, helping them adapt to climate change, but also supporting them to develop small community forest enterprises, earning income from the sale of furniture, honey, natural medicines. And forests are also vital to our global climate, providing an important global public good to all of us. First, they generate rainfall. Intact tropical forests pump massive volumes of moisture into the atmosphere, creating huge trails of water vapor high above. These rivers in the sky carry rainfall to places thousands of miles distant from where the forests are located. This is new science that tells us now the Congo Basin forest is a major source of moisture for southern Africa. The rainforests of West Africa may generate 40% of the annual rainfall in the Ethiopian highlands. Deforestation in the Amazon affects rainfall as far away as the Plata Basin in Argentina, in Mexico, and the farms in southern United States. This means deforestation of these big tropical forest pumps is changing the rainfall patterns of important food-producing regions. As we lose the big regional rainfall pumps, this affects the livelihoods of millions of farmers living far from tropical forests. And forests also reduce carbon emissions. They mitigate climate change. Tropical forests capture and store carbon. They remove the carbon pollution from the atmosphere scrubbing away the huge amounts of carbon dioxide gases that we have thrown into the air from burning fossil fuels. They absorb and fix that carbon into their tree trunks and the soil. They do this through photosynthesis by trillions of leaves on billions of trees. Photosynthesis is a natural carbon capture and storage technology functioning to scale. Our transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy will take time. From now to 2030 is a critical decade. We need tropical forests over this decade to keep us below 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, the climate target we all agreed in Paris in 2015. And so far, forests are doing a good job. Here on the one side, sources of carbon emissions. On the other, carbon sinks. Standing forests globally capture more carbon than deforestation emits. Tropical forests do much of this excellent work. Forests worldwide are still a net carbon sink. They are an exceptionally large sink, and unlike the ocean sink, which is constrained, and as it overloads with carbon, warms and acidifies, the forest carbon sink can expand and grow. But there are regional differences. The Amazon and Congo Basin forests are still net carbon sinks, but Southeast Asia is a net source of carbon emissions. The good news is that over the past few years, Indonesia has been reducing its annual rate of deforestation, admittedly from a high level. Brazil, on the other hand, which was successfully reducing its annual deforestation rate, is now seeing forest loss surge up the curve. We are losing huge swathes of natural forests, 13 million hectares every year. That is half the size of UK, mainly in developing countries. When tropical forests are bulldozed and burnt down on a large scale, deforestation has devastating consequences. Deforestation emits carbon back into the atmosphere, warming the planet, drying the planet, and acidifying the ocean. Forests are an effective climate solution, but deforestation is a big climate problem. And deforestation also has negative impacts on our health and people's lives. Deforestation places pressure on wildlife habitats, enabling pathogens like Ebola, Zika, and SARS to spill over from animals to humans. It devastates lives as well as livelihoods. Criminal gangs, illegal miners, and loggers encroach into the forests of local communities and indigenous peoples. Global Witness reports 4 community leaders are being killed every week while defending their forests and lands. So, what drives deforestation? Most forest in the tropics is cleared illegally. Corruption and poor governance in the forest and land sectors is a major underlying driver of deforestation. The illegal timber trade and illegal logging result in billions of tax revenue loss for cash-strapped exchequers in tropical forest countries. Most tropical forest conversion globally, about 70%, is land clearance for commercial agriculture. And most of this is also illegal according to the sovereign laws of the countries where it occurs. About 7% of forest loss is caused by mining. So here's a question to wake you up. 2 things. What do they have in common? Palm oil is ubiquitous in the lipstick, ice cream, and biscuits on our supermarket shelves. It's sourced from large cultivated palm plantations where natural forest has been cleared, often via dodgy permits and deals. And beef. sourced from large-scale ranches, also drives deforestation. So does soybean farming. The global commodity trade in timber, palm oil, beef, soybeans, pulp, and paper is a major driver of deforestation in the tropics. But consuming countries like UK, Europe, the US, China, the Middle East share responsibility for tropical deforestation happening outside their borders. So, third and finally, what have we learned over the past decade about what works? But before going there, I need to touch briefly on the catch-all term nature-based solutions, NBS, because it is in current political vogue. But quite a few developing countries do object to the term, nature having all kinds of different cultural connotations for them. And it's also a vague term and has led to some confusion in policy circles. So, nature-based solutions, NBS, are solutions based on land and sea ecosystems, including forests. They provide integral benefits for biodiversity, the climate, and people. However, the term tends to fudge the fact that in some cases, there are trade-offs involved when seeking multiple benefits. For those of you interested, the most rigorous description of what a nature-based solution is can be found in the peer-reviewed reference given on this slide. I will focus on nature-based solutions that involve forests. The first thing that international conservation-oriented NGOs advocate for are protected areas and national parks. We have learned something about what does not work. Much of the support to protected areas over the past 30 years in places where institutions are weak have had limited success. Developing countries with tropical forests are littered with conservation projects in nature reserves, where illegal logging, deforestation, and forest fires have run rampant, giving rise to the term paper parks. Providing direct funding and support to place-based conservation projects is tricky, and often the results dissipate fast as soon as donor or NGO funding stops. However, there are some examples that stand out to the contrary. Look at the green area of the Maya Biosphere Reserve in Guatemala. We can see where communities have rights to manage the forests, they have saved them from fires, in contrast to the rest of the park covered in red hotspots that is managed by the government agency and where fires are rife. These community-managed forests also, over the past 20 years, increased the density of mahogany trees and wild jaguar, and communities also earn income from sustainable timber extraction and from other forest products. A body of research now shows that where indigenous peoples and local communities have secure and legal land tenure and forest rights, deforestation rates are up to 20 times lower than under other management regimes. National Greens support programs. There are a growing number of countries that have developed or are developing public and national green support programs, including the UK after Brexit, the European Union and elsewhere, and the most well-known example is that of Fonafifo in Costa Rica. These programs repurpose farm subsidies. Governments make direct grant payments to farmers for providing environmental services and implementing mandatory conservation farm practices like soil conservation and keeping a certain percentage of the farm as woodland. In some countries, government directly pays local communities for protecting forests. These programs usually include penalties for non-compliance. FCDO supports the International Coalition for a Just Rural Transition to enable countries to learn about these types of programs. But one thing we have learned is financial incentives and payments are not enough to stop deforestation. We need better forest and land governance in tropical forest countries. Better forest and land governance needs 3 elements. First, to clarify the incoherent and inconsistent rules that govern land use and forest rights. Many overlapping laws leave loopholes that allow illegality. Second, increase surveillance and monitoring, not just of what is happening in forests, but of rule breakers and the ways they get round the rules. New remote sensing technology with handheld devices, as well as mandatory public information disclosure, helps increase transparency. Independent monitoring involving citizens and civil society can help. And third, law enforcement and sanctions that raise the costs of bad behavior and of deforestation. But poor governance in the forest and land use sector is deep-seated and notoriously intractable. However, there is some successful experience led by UK internationally. By aligning domestic policy at home in the UK with its international trade policy and bilateral development support, UK has helped developing countries with forests overcome some of the deep-rooted obstacles they face in implementing national forest and land governance reform. UK has taken reciprocal action as a consumer country to show how we are sharing responsibility with tropical forest country partners for the problem of deforestation beyond UK borders. Take UK's timber regulation. UK consumers want to be confident that the wood and the food they buy are sustainably produced, are not destroying forests, and, it goes without saying, are produced legally. Trust in voluntary private certification and sustainability standards and voluntary commitments by business has eroded, and consumers and citizens want stronger guarantees. That is why UK, like Europe and the US, has domestic legislation now in place that makes it illegal for UK companies to import timber into the UK that has been illegally logged in the country of origin. And now, the new UK Domestic Environment Bill under debate in Parliament will likely also make due diligence mandatory for international companies in the UK on their supply chains of other commodities like beef, soybean, palm oil. They will be obliged to demonstrate that the agricultural commodities they are sourcing from elsewhere and trading are deforestation-free and have not involved human rights abuses of Indigenous peoples living in forests. And the market incentives are huge, as clean green palm oil, perhaps from Indonesia, and chocolate from Ghana, for example, in effect, will be fast-tracked into the UK market. And these markets are worth billions of dollars for the forest producer trading country. There has been some success in reducing tropical deforestation where UK aligns its international development, trade, and environment policies. A more discriminating consumer market, backed by rules, helps champions in tropical forest countries get traction at home in reducing deforestation. Civil society, local NGOs partnering with UK NGOs, international NGOs, can help encourage transparency and accountability and follow the international trail of illegal trade and money linked to deforestation. And this can contribute to building vibrant democracy more broadly. Companies do their bit to strengthen the tracking and traceability of their supply chains, with benefits for consumers, producers, the economy, and the environment. And UK aid to country partner governments, for example, has helped bring a more diverse set of stakeholders into forest and land governance processes. This helps accelerate progress, reduces the risk of policy reversal, and sustains implementation. Allies in combating climate change and deforestation are not always found in the corridors of power. Teenagers are mobilizing around climate and environment in their countries. The rural communities and Indigenous peoples who live in and around forests and whose livelihoods depend on them, they too want a seat at the table with governments and business when policies and interventions that affect them are being discussed. And they too want to be in the room where it happens.